Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, True Crime and Felines. My name is Brandy, and every Friday we sit down and do a true crime case or mystery with one or more of my 14 felines. So this week we are dealing with yet another parent who had locked their kid up and done terrible things to them, this time for 28 years. I want to thank Cade Spencer. They're the ones that recommended this case to me. So if anybody else has any recommendations, I would love to hear them. So let's get started. Lydia Gouardo was born November 13th, 1962 in Masons-Alfort, France. Now, Masons-Alfort is only about 7 miles from Paris. Lydia had 2 other siblings, and they were older, Bruno, her brother, and Nadia, her sister. I'm not sure who their father was. Her mother married Raymond Gouardo, and let me tell you, this guy, what a peach. He was gruff, intimidating, and basically just an all-around jerk. Raymond really never held down a job. The most he ever did was, besides illegal things, sold business cards out of his van. Is that a thing? I guess it is. Anyway, money was tight and he ended up committing armed robbery. He was caught for this armed robbery and had to serve several years in prison. So while Raymond was in jail, Lydia's mother was pregnant with Lydia. Now, as far as Lydia had known, Raymond was her biological father. Later, at age 18, she would find out that Raymond was not her biological father. So it appears Lydia's mother got a little something on the side. Now, once Lydia was born, unfortunately, her mother would pass away shortly after her birth. So since Raymond was still in jail, Lydia spent the first 3 years of her life in a foster home along with her siblings Bruno and Nadia. When Raymond finally got out of jail, he was listed on their birth certificates, so he was legally their father. So he got out of prison, he rounded up all the kids, got them out of foster care, and moved them into a household. Now, Raymond also met a gal in prison through a personals ad. Her name was Lucine. He would end up moving Lucine into the house with the children. Lucine would call herself Mom, but the kids knew that she wasn't their biological mother. So cut to 1971, and Lydia is 8 years old. As any 8-year-old, she was told to take a bath, and she didn't want to. Lucine didn't want to deal with her, so she would end up filling a bathtub up with scalding hot water and putting Lydia in it. Lydia was burned pretty bad on her legs, but that didn't stop there. Once she was burned and bloody, Lucine then took a stiff brush to her legs to further punish her. And of course, Raymond just stood by and did nothing. Like I said, he was a peach. Now, there's a pretty famous picture in this case that Raymond took of Lydia when she was 8, right after this abuse had happened, and she is naked and bloody, and he made her smile. Now later, when all this was investigated, Lucine would say that, Lydia, just being a kid, jumped in the tub and it was an accident. Now, the burns were so bad that Lydia was actually hospitalized for 3 months. Raymond would end up filing a complaint saying that was a faulty hot water system just so he could get compensated for any damages. He never succeeded in that complaint, but it ended up being a 16-year battle. Now, once Lydia was able to come home, Raymond would be the primary caregiver. He ended up pulling her out of school, thinking that she was too hurt to go to school, and he would be the one to change her bandages every time. And Lydia would say that's when he started touching her inappropriately. It would then escalate over time until he was raping her. It didn't stop there. Raymond would torture her with power tools and saws and razor blades. If she was bad, he would hit her with a hammer. If that wasn't worse enough, when he was gonna rape her and Lydia wasn't, of course, into it, he would make her sniff ether or take a bunch of alcohol. And if she resisted at all, he would burn her with hydrochloric acid on a rag. Now, when this case kind of broke, there were numerous times that Lydia was taken to the hospital for burns and bruises and torture. And there were numerous admissions to numerous hospitals and doctors between the years of 1971 and 1999. You'd think somebody would say something, but as I get deeper into this case, this was the whole problem. Nobody was saying anything. Now, Lydia would end up just going along with this because she was told that the sexual abuse was normal, and she just kind of put up with that. She just didn't like the physical abuse. There were times when Lydia actually ran away, and she said that she only ran away when her dad hit her too hard. And there were many times that she would try to get help and she would be returned right back to her father in the family home. One time she escaped and actually called legal aid, and all they did was hand her over to the police, who then handed her back to Raymond. Now, the abuse was not happening just to Lydia. Raymond also physically abused Bruno and would physically and sexually abuse Nadia as well. Around 1980, Bruno would make a complaint to authorities, and he was actually removed from the home and put in a foster home. But for some reason, Nadia and Lydia were ignored and left in the home. Nadia ended up running away at age 20 to get away from Raymond. Now, years later, in 1996, she would file a formal complaint on Raymond on how she was abused physically and sexually, but nobody investigated it. Now that both of her siblings were gone out of the home and nobody could save her, Lydia became helpless. She would find out about this time that her mother had actually passed away when she was a baby, so that sent her deeply helpless because she always thought her mother would come and save her eventually. So Lydia was 18 at this time, and Raymond told her, now that you're 18, you can get pregnant. So Raymond would start keeping a schedule of her menstrual cycles to purposely get her pregnant. And he would start assaulting her up to 3 times a day. After he was done, he would tie her legs up into the air in order for gravity to increase the chances that she would get pregnant. Now at age 19, Lydia became pregnant for the first time. Raymond would end up locking her in the attic and tying her down so she could not seek an abortion. He would end up taking her to the hospital at the very last minute before she gave birth in Paris. He would proudly tell the nurses and the doctors there that he was the father and made her name the child Raymond Jr. Now, once they were back home with the baby, they made Lydia go back to the attic and they would not let her see her baby. Lydia would state that she was confused over the whole thing anyway, and she really didn't know how to love her son, so it was okay that she was kept away from him. But as the years went on, she would have 5 more children, 6 children total with Raymond. And Raymond would demand that their middle names all be Raymond. So her kids were Raymond Jr., Remy Raymond, Regis Raymond, Bryce Raymond, Boris Raymond, and finally Rudy Raymond. Now, all the children were raised by Raymond and Lucine, but they were very open that Lucine was not the mother. The kids were also brought up to hate Lydia and to constantly insult her. Raymond would often assault Lydia in front of the boys as well. So like I said, Raymond didn't even try to hide his activities and what he was doing with Lydia. He went so far as to brag to others about being the father of his daughter's children. He would actually say that, "I'm the father of my daughter's children." The community would continue to gossip about Father Gouardo making children with his daughter. Now you're probably wondering about Lucine's role in all this. Well, she was a peach too. She would often watch Raymond assault Lydia and participate in some of the physical abuse and laugh. When Raymond would tell Lucine that he was going to go up to the attic and assault Lydia, she would say, "Well, go on, get on with it." So the torture of Lydia continued because there were times that she spurned Raymond's advances and she would be punished with hydrochloric acid. Raymond would take Lydia to the doctor or the hospital to be treated. She also gave birth to all of her children in a hospital setting. When they would ask Lydia who the father was, she would tell them the truth. "Their father is my father." Raymond was always at all the deliveries, and the nurses or doctors never said anything. When Lydia found out that Raymond wasn't her biological father, she said she was actually relieved because she said, "At least now my kids will be normal." So like you've heard, the entire community knew what was going on and nobody said anything. Let's break it down. She was pulled out of school at 8 years old and nobody ever followed up with that. She was actually followed by social services from age 10 to age 18 and nobody intervened. She was seen by how many hospitals and doctors between her burn treatment and her pregnancies? Nobody said anything. Bruno was removed, but the sisters weren't. What is going on here? And then finally, Nadia coming forward in 1996, and her comments were brushed aside and nothing was investigated. So you can understand Lydia's personal hell at this point. Lydia was finally free of her captor in 1999. Raymond died of cardiac arrest. Lydia was 34 years old. Lydia would state now that Raymond was gone, she was no longer afraid of her stepmother, Lucine, and started to actually venture out into the world on her own. In the year 2000, Lydia went to a disco for the first time. That is where she met Sylvain Scurlo. They would begin a romantic relationship, and he made her actually see that what happened to her was not normal at all. Now, Lucine started to become intimidated by Lydia and Sylvain's relationship. She also saw how empowered Lydia was becoming about herself and ended up moving out of the house. Lydia finally felt for the first time she was completely 100% free. Now, Sylvain would go on to encourage Lydia to press charges and talk about what happened to her, because not only was she a victim, but her 6 children were as well. Sylvain would also encourage Lydia to act more as a mother to her children, something she was robbed of. Over time, Lydia and her children started having an actually mother-child relationship. They started celebrating birthdays and holidays, something that they never did before. Lydia stated that the only thing that was ever celebrated in that household was Raymond's birthday. Lydia decided to begin to speak publicly about what happened to her and to press charges against Lucine and to start calling out the community and the authorities for ignoring her plight. She said she decided to do this after hearing about the story of Elizabeth Fritzl. Now, if you don't know that story, Elizabeth was locked in a cellar by her father for 24 years, and he would impregnate her as well. So Lydia started the process of speaking out and suing everybody. And then it come to find out that Raymond had a lot of extracurricular activities outside the house, because one of Lydia's friends said that Raymond raped her too. Now, one of Lydia's sons would come forward as well and state that Lucine actually sexually abused him when he was a child. Now, all this would go on for a while, but 13 years after Lydia was finally freed, both her and her children were compensated for the whole ordeal that they went through. So Lucine was convicted of not reporting a crime in the case of Lydia, and also sexually abusing one of Lydia's sons. She was giving a 3-year suspended sentence and a fine. The prosecution and Lydia appealed because they were not happy with what she got, and the sentence was increased to a 4-year suspended sentence and a bigger fine. Lydia, of course, was not happy about this, but what else are you gonna do? Lydia would say, you know, she could have at least spent 5 days in jail after all the time I spent locked up. As far as our little peach Raymond, remember the extracurricular activities outside the home? He was actually suspected of the murder and rape of 4 girls in the area in 1987. And we're talking children, not like women. We're talking children. Their ages were 7 to 10, 4 of them. Lydia believes in her whole heart that Raymond had something to do with these disappearances of these girls because of the similarities of her situation and how they were found. They ended up exhuming Raymond's body in 2009 to extract his DNA to compare it with DNA found at the scene of some of these girls to see if they could find a match. Now, when they went to exhume Raymond, his tomb actually was desecrated and vandalized by his own children, by Lydia. They got him extracted though, got the DNA. Unfortunately, his DNA did not match the DNA they found at the scene, but the other evidence was circumstantial and too much of a coincidence to ignore. Now, Lydia would end up living in the same house where she was tortured for a number of years, but eventually she did move out with Sylvain to another house. She just did not go up to the attic while she lived there because of too many bad memories. She bears many scars, both emotional and physical. She states she is 80% disabled because of the torture that she endured for all those years. She has had many, many skin grafts over the years to repair the damage done by the burns with the hydrochloric acid. And she also had breast reconstruction because she said Raymond pretty much mauled her. Since she was kept out of school all those years, she had trouble reading and writing, but she is now learning. She is still with Sylvain Scurlo, and they had 2 children together. Lydia ended up writing a book called The Silence of Others in 2008 with a help of a French author. Now, the book is only available in French and Portuguese, so unfortunately, without a translation, I'm not able to read it, but I am interested in the book if they ever come out with an English version. She stated if it wasn't for the Fritzl case bringing attention to this type of crime, she probably would have never spoke up because nobody helped her all those years that she reached out. She stated she wanted to be friends with Elizabeth because they felt they could support each other and not be so alone. It's unknown if she ever did connect with Elizabeth. In the end, she said that she's just thankful that she's recognized now as a victim. And she goes on to say that I live from day to day, but I love life. When people complain, I just tell them that life is beautiful. For all the torture that Lydia went through for all those years, I'm glad that she's now happy and thriving and has learned to love and be a mother to her children. Why are parents locking up their children? Like, come on already, right? There are so many cases of this. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. Please don't forget to subscribe, and we will be back next week with another case or mystery. Thanks, guys. Bye.